Thank you for tuning in to Science Fiction Cartoons brought to you by Multiverse 2020, the Science Fiction Geek Track. Today, I'm Nicole Kurtz, and I will be moderating the panel. I'm going to let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves. We'll start with Robert Jeffrey.
Hey, my name is Robert Jeffrey. I'm a freelance comic book writer who's written for DC Comics, 133 Arc, and other publishers. And I'm a graduate of the 2017 New Talent Workshop, which was also hosted by DC Comics.
Belle?
Hello, I'm Belle Dragon. I am a local artist and zine creator. I write, I do art, and I used to work in the video industry. So there you go.
Joel?
Hi, my name is Joel Ruiz. I host and produce the actual play podcast Critical Bits. I'm also a freelance filmmaker and editor. I've made tons of sketches, short films, and do a lot of live streaming, and I've made a few actual play events, and just enjoy nerdy stuff.
Great. For more about our panelists, please check out the linked videos from them in the description or on multiversecon.org, where you can find links to all of them. Speaking of multiversecon.org, if you're watching this as part of a convention weekend stream, join us on the Discord channel for this track for a watch party of this panel with some of the panelists. Instructions on how to get onto our Discord can be found at multiversecon.org/Discord. We are collecting for charity at ko-fi.com/multiversecon. All donations, less fees, will go to support the Equal Justice Initiative. And finally, if you want some multiverse swag, check out the store on our website. We have t-shirts, and enamel pins, and more. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. The focus of this particular panel will be on American science fiction cartoons. Anime is a broad, huge genre of its own, and I want to focus on those cartoons we grew up with, and even the more recent cartoons like Star Trek Lower Decks. So question number one, panelists, and I want this to be more like a conversation, so feel free to jump in and talk and answer. But let's start at the beginning. What was the cartoon that hooked you into the genre of science fiction or expanded your love for SF?
So much pressure on that one right there. Let's start with the light one. Now, what's the basis of your whole fandom?
I think a lot of cartoons actually, at least when I was younger, were very sci-fi based. So, like Transformers, She-Ra had a sci-fi base, so did He-Man, and of course for me, because up there, it was the reruns of the Star Trek cartoon that really hooked me because I loved Star Trek so much. And then it just sort of like flowed from there into everything that was going. I mean, Transformers was a big one to get into science fiction.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, so I always say I'm an 80s baby. So Mask, and this is going way back, it was like mobile, armored, I can't remember what the SK Strategic Commandos with a K or something like that, but it was about a group of professional drivers and secret ops guys who would put on helmets, and then their cars were turned into like tricked out Fast and Furious spy cars. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of sci-fi involved there, and kind of delving into more comic book oriented animated series. Batman the Animated Series definitely had a kind of a sci-fi flair, and X-Men, the granddaddy of them all.
Oh yes.
That's what I was I think X-Men for sure. And then, but I don't know, because it was like you're saying, Belle, like lots of things, even things like in the 80s weren't like sci-fi focused. So many cartoons had like sci-fi elements and things like that. And then hindsight now, you realize it's because they're like, you know, you can sell toys.
Right.
Yes,
of course.
the merchandising.
But to me though, like
Thank you, Star Wars.
I don't know that, and I feel like you don't see it as much anymore, where it's just like everything just kind of has a little bit of sci-fi in it. But I definitely feel like that was like a huge, as you're all saying, like that's a huge like component that everything kind of had. But I think for me, like you were saying, Robert, like X-Men is what really got me, because they were always. Like it always was like kind of a futuristic modern day setting of they're like, yeah, it's like in the 90s, but we have like laser guns and flying cars. We're not really
And giant sentinels.
yeah, they're like, yeah, Nixon's a thing. The 60s are just the same for us, but we have you know all this high tech stuff.
So you know what? You guys did not mention like Super Friends or GI Joe, which are like GI Joe Cobra Commander, and the Cobras had like massive amounts of like science fiction tech.
Yeah, I can GI Joe. I can lean towards more so than Super Friends. You know, because GI Joe was still, and I hate this like 80s baby. So, you know, Joe, you know, Go Joe. I remember that. And you know, even I just thought about with X-Men, there were elements of time travel. You know, with Bishop with the Jerry curl coming back from going
yes.
past, and then even with even you know the space opera aspect of sci-fi when it came to the Phoenix Saga,
the Dark Phoenix Saga,
that. So
okay, so how many of you were a dork though, and actually like will admit to watching Droids?
Oh, dude, I love Droids.
I watch Droids too.
I loved it so much. Oh my god! And Ewoks.
Yeah,
like,
George.
Ewoks, I remember.
Where I grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, because you know everywhere is like channeling, like your program is different. If at Sci-Fi, because this was like early 90s, like I don't remember when, but like I just remember for like a year. Every morning at 7 a.m. they were playing an episode of Droids and Ewoks on Sci-Fi Channel.
Yes.
And so if I woke up early enough, I could watch the first one and then half of the second one while getting ready. And I did that all the time. And I know this isn't a cartoon, I just want to give like a quick mention to the 2 Ewoks films.
Yes.
Was like Battle for Endor, and then we don't have to go into but I did watch Droids and Ewoks and loved them. Sure, they're terrible now. I would not even want to revisit.
All right, so a quick question. What cartoon do you think did an excellent job? We kind of already touched on that. Like the pillars of the genre. We already talked about time travel. We talked about tech. We talked about like Transformers. Here are these alien entities who are all like machine based, right? And this whole, you know, Cybertron machine planet. And a spark of life, and She-Ra. So which one would you like to see either rebooted or given a live action treatment? And so like, thank you. So we did have that with Transformers, and I don't know, but so
Transformers, like, She-Ra, G.I. Joe. I mean, I don't know if there is a cartoon that hasn't been because technically we even got
so I was thinking like Voltron and and even She-Ra with those
rebooted.
They did, right, as the cartoon. So I'm thinking like G.I. Joe didn't get rebooted as a cartoon per se. It got rebooted as a live action. So would you like to see it in a cartoon version? And if so, what would you change? Same thing for She-Ra. Like she is rebooted as a cartoon series, but there's no live action. So if you were to make She-Ra a live action,
I just want them to make more She-Ra cartoons. I don't need them to make it live action. I just need them to be
There's
like,
some people who are clamoring for a live action She-Ra.
I loved that. I love that show, and they did such a good job, and I was so happy with it. And I'm very happy with the ending. But they like even set up. They're like, here's like a little teaser where we're gonna go off on more adventures. It's like cool. We did She-Ra and the Princess of Power, so let's do the next one. Give it to me right now.
What'd you love about it, Joe? Versus like the original series.
Honestly, because I think it too. Because like, because we were talking about some things like going for like cartoons and like live action. I want to see more stuff get rebooted as cartoons because I love the genre. There's so much you can do with it. You can really like hone yourself. I personally am a fan of episodic storytelling than just straight up movies. So that's personal preference. But especially for like She-Ra, like there's such heart to that show. There's so much fun. The characters are so silly, but then there's serious tense moments, and they really let the show like kind of bounce back and forth all over the place between like, oh, we're having like a fun, silly episode where we're all like planning on how to do this by playing D&D. But then like, you know, we're all dealing with like, because it has a lot of serious stuff while it's just like, these are all teens characters. So they're dealing with loss and trauma and anger. And I think that like, it's just really interesting to see that. And it's also like kind of a lot of things in like the sci-fi tropes where that's always a way to like mask what we're really talking about. But that's why I think especially with like cartoons, and especially because like we already talked about this, most modern stuff that we like and we grew up on, they're like, hey kids, tell your parents to get this helicopter. Like this is a dope helicopter, right? And we're like, yeah, but this, like the storyline, they're like, cool, helicopter. But now it's not as much. And so I think that it would be really cool to see more stuff get revisited. Because sure, they're going to try to sell ads and want to like, and try to make money off of it. But kind of like where it's like, cool, we'll make some money. But also like, now that all the people that grew up watching these things are now like seasoned storytellers and writers, let some of those people get their hands on, like, I'd love to, we're talking about like X-Men, like to see like a full revamp of like an X-Men.
For me, so one of the I'm sitting here taking notes, which is weird. One of the things that kind of jumps to mind is Voltron. Voltron, the legendary defender. I guess this is probably going to be kind of partly a big love fest for Netflix when it comes to animation. I'm a huge space
Castlevania
guy,
as well.
and you can see that with like the Star Trek poster and the Starfleet Academy T-shirt. I was representing tonight. So one of the things that, and I think anime does this really well, but Western animation or Western kind of studios who create these ideas, they have not tapped into space opera as much as I would want them to. So when Voltron, the legendary defender, came up, popped up on Netflix, I was like, okay, they're just going to be on Earth and they're going to be fighting in big mech suits. And then 2 or 3 seasons later, they're going off into space. And it's for me, Voltron was one of the most kind of diverse, inclusive, wide-ranging examples of storytelling that I've seen in a while. And it's like a huge space opera, and I don't think people realize that, especially like if you're a Star Wars or primarily for me a Star Trek fan. So I got what I wanted before Star Trek got there, in animation form, because I feel that with animation, just like with comic books, animation is going to be more costlier, but you can do whatever. Your imagination is the only limit that you have. And actually there's no limit to your imagination. It's the same thing I feel with comic books. And, secondly, as far as to answer your question about an animated series that I would love to, that has huge sci-fi elements that I would love to see live action, would be something like Sword Art Online, which is an anime. But for some reason, but to see that brought to life would be huge. And once again, Netflix announced a few years ago that that's what they're doing. So I know that there's a big discussion about anime and trying to diversify that, and their hits and misses. Ghost in the Shell, sorry, but I do feel that Sword Art Online would be awesome as far as a live action, I guess adaptation.
I think that certain cartoons or certain shows that have that require like a certain gravitas would work really great as live action translations, but I really think that anything that needs to maintain either a childlike air or needs to have sort of a sense of innocence or at the very least a sense of we can go anywhere and we can do anything. It's much like comic books. The difference between a comic book movie and a comic book is that you can literally, you've got all the special effects an artist can draw, whereas in a live action, you're always going to have a reinterpretation of that imagery. And like what we saw with Transformers to the live action movies, like I can't watch them because the transforming and the actual bots are actually like motion triggers for me because of the way that they move. And then there's also like weird genre hopping. I'm strange in that I hate horror. I cannot watch it if it's live action. But like Castlevania, love it.
Right.
It's awesome. But you put something like that in live action and it would be way too intense. Literally all of my empathy levels would just ping off and I would just like, I can't watch this. This is too much, you know? And I think that that's something that sometimes people in their fervor to, you know, try to get more people to watch it or try to make it, it's almost like it's a gimmick to turn a cartoon into a live action sometimes. What do y'all think?
I think it takes some of the expressive quality to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And also a lot of times, you know, sometimes they're cash grabs. You know,
that's true.
I don't think that as a culture over here in the US that we have come to accept the animation field for everything that it can provide to us as far as entertainment as much as a place like Japan. Like anime, the thing I love about anime is like, and we're specifically talking about sci-fi, you know, there's a whole genre of sci-fi anime. There's a whole genre of sports anime. There's a whole genre of slice of life anime. Those animators or those creators will tap into whatever part of life that they want to tell a story about and just do it. And that's why I feel that, you know, sci-fi wise, I feel that we're kind of catching up. You know, I think we have some solid examples.
Agreed.
You know, we've touched on Castlevania, you know, She-Ra, which is
we have not talked about the Dragon Prince, which is a lovely, amazing show, diverse, inclusive, but fantastic storytelling. And so the Dragon Prince is another one. Again, we're just hyping up Netflix here, but another really amazing American cartoon that has that, Belle has that sense of wonder that you had mentioned before, that sense of what else is out there, that coming of age, right? And so, but it also deals with what you were talking about, Joel, and it packs a punch just in much the same way that Voltron and She-Ra does as well. Each of those instances are dealing with things that teenagers are dealing with now. And so, but it's not as clumsy as like Super Friends. Well, hey, at the end of the episode, here's a life lesson for you. It's not like that. It's very much embedded in the storytelling itself. And so I think that humanizes all those characters, even though they're animated characters. And so it also allows teenagers to put themselves in those roles.
I think it also gives us a way to explore genres that are usually kept in a box, like post-apocalyptic. I don't know if anybody's seen Kibo.
I was gonna bring that up. Yes.
Kibo is awesome. I mean, it's a post-apocalyptic story and storytelling. It is fantastic because it's got this, you know, optimistic character and they're going through the same sort of childlike things, but it's got genetic manipulation. It's got, you know,
I'm writing this down right now because I know what I'm doing after this panel.
So good. You really should watch it. And the same voice actress who plays the main character is the one who does the voice acting for Glimmer in She-Ra. So it was kind of nice to hear like a familiar voice to that. And it was just one of those things where I was just like, normally post-apocalyptic, like really, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. I mean, being a disabled person, most post-apocalyptic is pretty much, you're dead. You're dead. You're gone. Everybody that we don't appreciate or think of as a person, they don't really exist anymore. And so this was nice to kind of see not just inclusive, but just varied people and backgrounds, and then to deal with some really heavy concepts of what do we think about intelligence and what do we think about sentience and what makes a person a person.
And so I think that's and I think, Robert, I want to go back to something you said. You said that in the in the westernized part of the world where we are, there is not I don't think we view animation as art. in the same way or respected as a higher level of art as people do in Japan. And so because of that, again, I feel like it's along the same lines of teaching. It's like, okay, if I can draw this stick person, then I can draw, then everybody can draw. It's not hard. I'm not understanding that this is true art, right?
Yeah.
That it's art, like the drawings and the inking, and that's, it's work. B, but it takes an amazing amount of talent and work. It's a work of art. Like comics are works of art. So I don't think that people quite understand that or respect that, especially here in the United States. Can we talk about Gangbusters? That is not the name of that cartoon.
Cannon Busters?
Cannon Busters.
Yeah, because as soon as you said Busters, I'm like, yes. So
can we talk about Cannon Busters, which is like an American style anime? You guys know what that is? Again, Netflix. Right, but
I mean, for me, that was, once again, it was on my list, things to bring up. LaShawn Thomas is that dude. So LaShawn Thomas is the creator. He's the lead animator on the series, and his background goes back to Legend of Korra. Like he was back in South Korea, working on that series. So he kickstarted the I think it was like a pilot, 30-minute pilot, and there were a few years between the kickstarting of the pilot and then it actually getting picked up for like a 10-episode season on Netflix. So on a couple of fronts, I'm primarily an indie comic book creator. So to see him take an indie comic that he came up with and conceptualized and all that, and have it eventually get to Netflix was very inspiring. But if you watch the series, there is so much color with the characters. It has a Cowboy Bebop type of vibe, which itself is influenced by Western television and also the music, and it's just a really good it's actually kind of a space opera. It's set on it's kind of a sci-fi thing. So I think that's a really good example of something that is reflecting what we're talking about today. But Cannon Busters is a solid one, and I can play the intro and the outro songs only like while working out. It's solid. But LaShawn Thomas is one that who needs to be given credit for helping to kind of push this country's animation to where it is. I think he has a bunch of other anime too that should be checked out. But Cannon Busters, start with that.
Yeah. So let's talk about, we talked about Netflix releasing like all of these amazing animated science fiction shows. What do you guys think? So if you don't have Netflix, you don't have access to them, right? And so I remember growing up, like all these great shows, the 90s, X-Men, Super Friends, G.I. Joe, Transformers, they were all on network television and they were all accessible to everyone who had like an antenna. Do you think that because these shows are only available on certain streaming platforms, do you think that kind of limits their accessibility?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that the problem with the serve as you go sort of television that we have now is that we've lost in a lot of ways the basis of our broadcast system, which was supposed to be nationwide accessibility. We were supposed to provide not just an emergency network, but also an entertainment network that kind of bound our country together in like a culture. And now it's all down to whether or not you have access to the internet, because keep in mind, a lot of rural places in the United States do not have access to the internet. And whether or not you then have the disposable income to then be able to pick and choose from streaming services, and then whether or not you even have service that would allow you to stream. So I think that starts to very much create a divide between the digital haves and the digital have-nots.
Yeah, it's becoming, in some areas there's like a desert, right? Joel, you are lit up. Do you have something you want to say?
No, I was saying I agree with that, because that's what's like now too, it's like I don't have any kids or anything, but just even talk to like other friends with like, did you just see this show? And I'm like, what is that on? Oh, I don't have that one. Let me see.
Right.
Let me see if I can borrow somebody's password in exchange for one of my own. It's like, oh, Crunchyroll? No, I already used my 2-week free trial of that. Let me make a new email real fast.
It's definitely like a desert of not being able to assess. Like I feel like so many students and so many people. I'm a former teacher. I think so many, and I think about teenagers. There's so many of them that could benefit from watching like the Dragon Prince, or benefit from watching She-Ra, or benefit from watching Cannon Buster, just to see themselves represented in an animated form, and not having access to that. Right, that's a problem. Yeah. But I know I wanted to talk a little bit about your favorites. Now I'm going to ask you to keep it short. Because I'm sure if you guys are like me, you can gush, right, about how awesome your favorite one is. But pick one that's your absolute favorite. If someone said, hey, I have never watched a science fiction oriented animated cartoon before, what should I watch first? What would you say? And then what's your favorite?
Steven Universe. Like, you want to talk about space opera? There's literal singing.
Like, I'm surprised Steven did not come up earlier.
I mean, of course, as a queer person, I'm like, no, you got to.
Yes. Okay.
Because like Steven, I think is like I don't want to, because I think that'd be like a good starter. Because like I love Steven Universe, I think it's good, but I really do think like if you have no introduction, it really like it starts nice and steady, and it's pretty basic on the tropes, and it's just kind of like, yeah, like you're trying to figure out, and then eventually just gets into like the most in-depth stuff ever. And if you want to follow it, and then eventually you're like, I love how convoluted it got, and there's 17 million storylines, and then everything that happened before, and you're like, yeah, so you like that? They're like, yeah. I'm like, cool. Here's this genre.
Yeah, exactly.
Where everything that happens 7 years later, the author's like, I remember that thing here. This is why it happened.
Yeah.
See, the thing I love about it is it starts on Earth. Everything seems pretty like it's weird, but it's not outside the realms. And then all of a sudden, we're in space.
And I think this is just to go back to what we were talking about earlier with what I think is good about like about the cartoon genre itself. Is Steven Universe is another really good example of like how the tone shifts that it can go through, the levels of story that it talks about, like the heaviness of the subject matters while still being like the silliest thing. One of my favorite episodes is it's not like super late into it, but it's like one where about time travel where Steven makes a bunch of different versions of himself, and then is like having to figure out, I forget what the lesson is, but like at the end is singing a song with the crystal gems about how he didn't learn the lesson until he had to watch himself die. And then there's just like a cut of like two of the gems being like, what'd you say? And it doesn't address it. And it's just stuff like that. And that's why I think like cartoon sci-fi genre like is just so good, because it really can just like, I don't know of any other kind of art form that so easily just weaves in and out of stuff like that.
Anime, but okay.
I'm saying like we're
anime is animation,
right? I know.
We're talking about more like just American, like, because yes, obviously anime is that. But yeah, we're like talking about American. Like, right. I don't watch a lot of movies that like it's like jumps around as much as that.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree with you. And I think because Steven Universe, and because cartoons tend to be episodic, they have enough room to do that, right? And time to do that. Robert?
For me, it's probably gonna have to be Voltron.
Yeah.
Again, like there's to maybe like X-Men back in the day, but now Voltron. And if we were weaving fantasy in here, it would be Legend of Korra. I know like that hurts a lot of Avatar fans, but Korra for me is anyways, that's another discussion for another day. But the Voltron, like I said, impressed me so much with its scope. Was that it was just something that kind of captured my heart as a Trekkie. But then having a crew of color and getting into those paladins and then when I realized that the voice actress who does the princess's voice was black. I mean, there stuff like that connects, and it was the same thing. Like even with Steven Universe, like my wife is a huge Steven Universe fan in this house. Like she's the Universe fan in here. And when she showed me like a collage of all of the voice actors, you know, from that show, that there's something about that kind of hits hard. So kind of the same thing when it comes to Voltron. It just kind of knocked all those, you know, beats. It hit all those like beats for me, and it hurt when it came to an end, but you know, it is what it is. But I think that, you know, Netflix knew that they had, and it's sort of like with the Dragon Prince, I think that they knew what they had on their hands, because the fandom for that animated series is really big. It's really huge, and
it's fantastic.
Yeah, and I'm also a huge fan of like kick butt fight scenes. So you know, the anime that there's so much going on with that show that's why it, you know, it ranks up there as being like my favorite sci-fi animated series.
So I'm a big horror person. Even though I'm a Trekkie, right? And Voltron satisfies all the beats from my Trekkie heart. And when I saw that Princess Allura was like not white, I was like, heck yeah. I was so excited. And then I saw her voice actress and I was like, I mean, talk about feeling seen, right? Not only is she a princess, not only is she like an elf, like it just all the things, right? But for me, Castlevania is my baby. Only because of Isaac, right? Isaac is not a major player. Well, he kind of is now, but he's a supporting character. But Castlevania in and of itself is very complex. The animation is brilliant. And I think Belle mentioned this earlier about how it's kind of like a stylized blood, right? But I love all the characters, strong female characters. Like it's just a well put together cartoon. And so it's not exactly science fiction, even though there are science fiction elements to it. I still really enjoy it. So I think if I had to tell someone where to start with science fiction, I would of course say Voltron too, just because I think that I just love that series. I cried at parts, I've laughed at parts. Like, I just really enjoyed that. Okay, so next question.
I want to point out. So I do think Steven Universe is a good start. I want to say my favorite, and this is definitely more adult thing, as Venture Brothers, which is not which also R.I.P. just got.
Yeah, I was like, what?
Just got the hatchet. But so for that show for me in particular, I think also that one really just shows the depth of storytelling. Is like we're talking about how things can go back, because I've used that as an example, because like the podcast I run, it's like nerdy about teen superheroes. We have been like, people have been like, oh, it seems like, you know, have y'all watched Venture Brothers? I'm like, yes, we all have, very much. So it's definitely influenced a lot of stuff. But I love that show because like how it's one of the most unique looks at the superhero genre, because it takes a lot of those of like sci-fi superhero tropes where everything's like untouchable, and then it's just kind of like shows like there's like one where like Nathan Fillion plays a Spider-Man character, but it's like atomically correct, so where like the webbing just is shot out of his butt, and like there's like times that he gets but it's just like things like that where it's just like the silliest things, and the whole world is very dark, and I do a lot of like dark comedy stuff and have lots of trauma and depression that I put into all my work. So that whole show is just you know, the two writers bleed on the page. So I think as far as like if I was going to try to commit some of like a sci-fi cartoon, where it's like this is like good ones to start on, and if you want to know like my all-time favorite, it is Venture Brothers. And please, Netflix or whoever, go pick it up. Like whoever.
Someone pick it up.
We're plugging Netflix.
We're definitely worth picking up. I agree with that.
Give it like the final 8th season at least.
All right. What's your gems? What's your hidden gems? The ones that aren't overly popular, but you feel like needs to get a shout out. Joel just kicked it off with Venture Brothers.
Yeah, I was like, so that's kind of, I feel like even though it has a following, it's still
that
like
was my next question.
One.
So that was a great segue. Thank you.
You know, it's weird because it's Star Trek Lower Decks. I'm sorry. I know it's like it is on everybody's radar, but it's okay. I feel that it's more on Trekkies' radars but I think it's something that if you don't know anything about the franchise, give it a shot.
Yes.
I think that there there's enough in there for the Trekkies with all of the Easter eggs and knowledge of that universe. But then there's also just really good comedy that I feel everybody would just enjoy. And it's one of those it's another kind of issue of being behind a paywall. But I've been super hyped with what Trek has done kind of post 2010s or whatever to bring new audiences on. And I think that if you're a fan of things like Rick and Morty, this is definitely something that I feel folks should check out.
Isn't he like the illustrator, or he's the guy who does Rick and Morty is doing Lower Decks?
Yeah, somebody he has some connections to Rick and Morty. I can't remember, but I know the showrunner, and I'm drawing up his name. But that's definitely one I think people should kind of give a shot. As far as a quote unquote hidden gem. And then also we mentioned it before, Kipo in the Age of the Wonder Beast. That's another one that I feel is kind of flying under the radar. I was actually happy that they got a new season. But it's because Belle, when you were talking about that, the term that comes to mind when I watched that first episode is whimsical, post-apocalyptic sci-fi, and anything that I can kind of feel good with watching and have fun with, that's something that I love. So Kipo is another one that I would definitely want to kind of check out.
I'm a big fan of positivity.
Yeah.
So, Belle, do you have a hidden gem or something that you feel just doesn't get?
Know everything. Like I feel like my tastes are unfortunately very mainstream. The only thing that happens is that as far as like, I guess if we're talking about fantasy, I actually kind of tend to lean a little bit more fantasy than science fiction.
Okay.
But I know the Troll Hunter series on Netflix is really, really good. As far as and I don't feel like it's gotten as much like attention as some of the other Netflix shows have. And it's got a good cast. But honestly, I think we've really kind of hit on everything that like I'm a huge fan of, and I don't really watch like underground indie stuff, sadly. I mean, I would like to be that person, but I'm not that cool.
Troll Hunters is actually pretty cool because it's Troll Hunters, and then it goes to Tales of Arcadia, which is like a sequel series that is then Sci-Fi because it's about aliens going there, and then they just come out with a standalone season that wraps it all up called Wizards of Arcadia. I'm a fan of it. I don't know if you can tell.
No, couldn't tell.
Yeah. I think for like hidden gems though, I think it is. I think just with what you're talking about earlier, like Netflix is like coming out with more things, and I do think like kind of like cartoons and animation as a genre is starting to get more respect in America, especially too because you can like. It's always just about like seeing what other markets do. So like, especially too, because it's now more of like a global market for like media and seeing like how much stuff. Like I didn't know this about anime until about like 4 or 5 years ago when I lived with an old roommate. But like I remember like being like, "What's this? What is this anime?" Because I'm used to just like all the anime I watch is like people doing murders and crazy stuff like that. And it's just like, "Oh, this is about someone running a bakery."
Yep.
And I was just like, like, what is it like Ghosts? Is it like,
nope.
And they're like, no, he's just
running a bakery.
a little bakery. That's the girl he has a crush on. And I was just like,
and that's it.
yeah. And I was just like, oh, but yeah, because it's just because but it's the same thing where if I saw someone watching a TV show, I'm like, it's about a dude running a bakery. He has a crush on that girl. I'm like, all right, well, let me watch this show. But like, it definitely is like just being like, oh, it's a cartoon. It needs to be like big and flashy. But I do think that it is just kind of becoming more like mainstream and accepted as an art form. And I think it's starting to get like the respect too that like, because a lot of people are like, oh, kids shows and stuff like that, but it's just like, no, screw you. Like the storylines, like we were talking about, like in Steven Universe, Legend of Korra, like She-Ra and stuff like that. Like some of those storylines are stuff that like very adult. I wish they would have had like kind of tones like that, because like we talked about earlier, like She-Ra when we were all younger was just kind of like, look how cool these toys are. Anyways, here's the lesson.
Well, okay, I would actually like to debate that point because J. Michael
Yes.
Straczynski actually wrote for She-Ra, and there is actually buried after, I think, in the middle of the first season to the second season, the war, and the entire war thing is incredibly scary and in-depth because the good guys don't win. Like the good guy, you have to deal with the fact that that you're in this place and on this planet, and the Horde wins.
Yeah,
I definitely think that, and I had this as a question, but I didn't ask it because we kind of addressed it in a roundabout way, was the idea that cartoons like the 80s G.I. Joe and Super Friends taught like social justice ethics and basic safe behavior, but it was very explicit, right? Like I said, it came at the end of the cartoon, or it was very heavily pushed through the narrative of the story when that's why you don't, And so I feel like it's not really missing from the stories that we have now. I think it's just more implicit in the way, in a way to teach viewers.
Because that's what I feel like it is. It's a better use of it as a storytelling aspect. Because if you like watch something and at the end someone turns to you and like, by the way, this is to tell you this, like you're not really absorbing it. But like, excuse me. Like for instance, my love of She-Ra. Recently, I had a friend like talk about how he hated Catra and she was terrible and he wanted her off the show. And I might have been having a few drinks, but then I might have then teamed up with my other friend and just started to scream at him about how he doesn't understand that Catra is just a hurt person and she doesn't know how. And I just started like going off all these things, and eventually he was like, "Oh, I never thought of it like that." And I was just like, "Yeah, Kevin, it's because you don't have trauma and PTSD. Anyways, I'm fine." And so I do think that's why it is like. I do think like there are all those like there's still morals and there's still lessons like they had like trying to
in the 80s
the end wrap ups. They're like, all right, kids, don't do this, but now instead of it's literally the show don't tell, and so and I think that's too with like cartoons over like live action. It's kind of easier for everybody. It's kind of easier for everyone to see themselves in a character opposed to live action. It's kind of like, all right, well that's just like. That one person, it's kind of easier. It's kind of and like to me, it's kind of harder. Like I can still see myself in certain characters, but like in cartoons, I think it's like kind of easier for just everyone to just be like, oh yeah, like this is all like a fantasy realm, so like I could be any of these. And it's just easier to kind of plug in and out stories. But I do think though that like just like that whole thing, and then just kind of seeing now publicly like, oh, these really big, heavy. In-depth, smart, funny, intelligent stories are being told through animation. I think that's kind of why you're seeing, going back to what you're saying, like more of Netflix kind of popping up, and because they're using using the full capabilities of it.
Yep.
Well, there's going kind of focusing on like kind of representation and inclusion, inclusive whatever. I can write, but I can't talk. But there's a series that just popped up on Netflix this week done by DreamWorks called Jurassic Park Camp Cretaceous or whatever. And the lead character in that is like a teenage black kid who wins an opportunity. It's kind of a Willy Wonka situation. He beats a Jurassic Park video game. The other thing I love about that universe is that even after all of these deaths, the company that runs Jurassic Park is like, let's make a video game and
send more kids.
Yeah, so he wins this video game, and there's this whole like 5-minute sequence where he's talking with his brother about his love of dinosaurs or paleontology, and he's like quoting stats and all this stuff. And I go back and I think about when I went to go see Jurassic Park, in the theaters, the first one, and my mind was just being blown, and just looking up, and after, I think maybe it was a sequel, there was one black girl, but in the first one, the kids running through that park, running away from the raptors and the T-Rex and all this stuff, they were, white kids. It was like, but as a kid, I just, it's Spielberg. Spielberg is magic for my mind. That's my boy going back. But there was a part of me that was just like, I wish I could have been in that role. So watching this cartoon or this animated series, I love that there were kids now who were my age back then who were watching this for the first time and thinking that, oh yeah, I can do that. You know, that I loved, they have some type of representation. So, that's a big thing. That's
It
a
is.
huge
It's
thing.
huge.
Us being nerds for dinosaurs is as big as anybody else. So that's, that was kind of what I was saying. It was just like a 5-minute conversation of him nerding out over dinosaurs, which was, for me, it was beautiful. And then after that, he's kicking butt and saving the day, from raptors. So,
which in and of itself, again, is amazing, right? Because when are little black boys allowed to be heroes and protagonists?
I think it's getting better. I think, I'm always going to, push and say,
oh yeah,
indie comic books have been doing it
for
so.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. And I think, and one other kind of aspect, we touched on this. I think that social fundraising campaigns, like done through Kickstarter and through Indiegogo, those allow animators of all ilk to have a chance to kind of shoot their shot. There was a team called Kamikaze. They do a webcomic, about a post-apocalyptic. I think she's a superhero, or whatever. And I feel bad because I've written for the universe, but they're getting an animated short made after doing a Kickstarter campaign. So that's another option for us to see more inclusive and diverse and representative animation, that we want to see. So that's something I think people should look towards, with Kickstarter and Indiegogo in the future.
In terms of supporting science fiction, cartoons, and comics.
Yeah. Exactly.
And bringing that diversity and that representation, continuing that march that we just talked about, all these great shows, they had to start somewhere. And so even Cannon Busters we were just talking about, that was a Kickstarter. And so it'd be great if you can support those. Those of you who are watching the panel today, just know that those ideas don't occur in a vacuum. They need support and studios take note. They notice who watches. They take note of what's popular, and so where people spend their money. And so if you want to support great science fiction cartoons, definitely throw some bucks behind Indiegogo and Kickstarter campaigns.
I love that as technology starts to march forward, like we started to see more and more voices creating indie movies and things like that. And as technology starts moving ever forward again, we're going to start seeing more indie animation. Like YouTube is just a huge outlet for, I mean, a lot of crap, but also a lot of really great animation and a lot of really great animators. And there are people who are creating new things all the time. And with animation technology now being something that's accessible to more people, I think we're going to start seeing a huge boom in that. Especially with like the rise of digital puppetry, which is something that I occasionally do, which is you actually have a program that can track your eyes and track your mouth, and so you don't actually have to go through the whole puppetry animation. You can literally just build a puppet and then it will do everything that you do as an actor to incorporate into a scene.
That's not Unreal Engine, right? That's what software does that?
Well, I use Adobe Character Animate, which is not the best, but it's what I have.
But you make it work, right?
Until you got a studio backing you with thousands and thousands of dollars, whatever you got at your disposal is the best, best tools you got.
Right. But I do agree. I think you're right, Belle, that the future is definitely going to allow us opportunities, or creators their own opportunities to make their own films and their own animated films. Because the tech is becoming just so accessible.
Studios in a studio system are kind of their own worst enemy, because eventually you get to the point where everything's rehashed and redone to the point where you either have to strike out and you have to find something that's new, or you lose your audience. The losing your audience to a free platform would be something that would just, I think, make most studios lose their tiny minds. So We're going to see a lot more people who create for YouTube and create for small platforms are going to start being, pulled out and rise up. And I think that it's really up to us as viewers and as fans to make sure that the things that we love and that we see being produced by good people get in front of, the right people. Like, we need to really support no matter what, and not assume that just because we love it that everybody's supporting it and everybody's putting it forward.
Yeah.
Especially if I was going to say, especially too, just on the subject of like indie creators, all of us are within that boat. Like, if you like an indie creator, obviously supporting them financially, whatever you can, is great. That's, I get support from people and fans, and but the main thing is you just tell people about stuff.
Share it. Yep.
Oh my God. Like share
and tell.
If there's an artist you follow and they come out with a weekly or monthly webcomic, or there's somebody that's like putting up animations, like share that. Just share it. Cause like literally that's like, this is like kind of a not about sci-fi animation, but it's kind of the same thing. Like, if you create your own stuff and you tell somebody, like if I go someone and say, hey, I'm Joel and I create a show called Critical Bits, no one wants to listen to it because I made it. And why would of course we tell it. But then like, if like Robert's like, hey, I met this guy the other day named Joel, who's really cool and he has a really good show named Critical Bits. It's like, well, Robert, you have no stake in this. I'll listen to you.
Right.
So, like, you not having a stake in the work and just enjoying it enough to tell someone else about it really matters. So on the note of like supporting smaller indie creators, or even like newer like shows that we're talking about, like the hidden gems, if you don't think as many people like know about as much, like just tell people about it and get it into it, because it's just that really is like word of mouth is the best way to get these things. And especially too, just like I want to see more like of like sci-fi cartoons like kind of get a front line, and I would love to see like the cartoon and animation genre itself, like expand. We are talking about like and anime, yes, obviously, but like for like the American market,
right,
and storytelling, because there's so much more. I love both like animated and live action, but like there's a lot you can really do, and it's really fun to see it get explored. So just tell people about stuff, and like especially too like finding newer indie creators and like following them on the way up. And also it just feels really cool when you find someone and you can like not in a pretentious way be like, I've been following them for 10 years and like I like this one cartoon they actually had a webcomic it was based off of that they deleted but I saved. But yeah.
No, I agree. Definitely tell and share. For authors, reviews are the best thing because authors are always looking for feedback, but definitely tell other people about the things you love. We're very quick to talk about the things that drive us crazy or that annoy us, but we not always as quick to talk about the things that bring us joy. So it would be very great if you could do that. All right, so as we approach our end of time, can you tell people where they can find you online? Really quickly. We can start with Belle, but let's go with ladies first.
You can find me at Cat Dragon Lair everywhere on the web. I've had to change over recently since I've gone from being an in-person author, comic creator to a YouTube person, but you can find me Cat Dragon Lair. It's where I keep all my nerdy stuff.
Nice. Robert?
Yeah, you can find me at robertjeffrey.com. That's robertkjeffrey.com. And all my social media handles are on there, including plenty of books that you can purchase, if you so choose.
I recommend Route 1.
Route 1?
Wait, is it not the name of it? Right, 3. Sorry. Okay, for the record, it's late. I'm kind of tired. Okay. I apologize. It's Route 3, and I love that series. And I have like posters of that series, and I know the name of it, but I had a mental.
No, Nicole has been huge in the corner of Route 3.
I apologize. Go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, you can find my personal socials at Joel W. Ruiz on Twitter. But my show, Critical Bits, you can find that at criticalbitcast.com. And all of our social media handles for Critical Bits are Critical Bitcast. And we only really use Twitter. But go check it out. And then if you go to our website though, we got fan art, lots of fun stuff in all the episodes. And then real quick, go to seasonsminiseries.com. I did a 6-episode miniseries called Seasons. It's completely standalone. It's a AP podcast, one of my favorite things that I've done. So, but like I wanted to plug that real quick. And just go watch sci-fi stuff and tell people about it. I love it.
Absolutely. And I'm Nicole Kurtz. I am the owner and publisher for Welcome and Mars Press, where we amplify marginalized voices in speculative fiction. If you enjoyed this panel, please be sure to check out Multiverse's other programming this weekend. Our full schedule is available on multiversecon.org. Thank you.